Welcome to our first kind of town hall meeting style related to the Foothills in this particular case. I'm Mayor Colin Haim of the District of Lanceville. We also have some other council members here. Councillor Denise Haim is here. Councillor John Colson is here. I don't know if any other councillors are here. If you are, raise your hand because I can't see all. Oh, Councillor Dave Scott, Councillor Graham Savage there towards the back as well, and earlier Councillor Rod Degrave was here as well. Like I said, this is our first attempt at a town hall style meeting, something that we've never really done before. So logistically, we had no idea kind of how many people would show up. We had no idea with regards to the combination of the open house with Foothills, what level of interest there would be. So bear with us this evening in terms of working our way through this first event. Like I said, the topic tonight revolves around the Foothills. We have representatives of the Foothills here in conjunction, Mark Holland, the project manager, Allard Ocleon, the president of Storm Mountain, okay, as well as some of their experts, water experts, traffic experts, people to answer questions that you may have. In terms of format, initially what we're going to start off with is a presentation by Mark Holland with respect to the Foothills. Some of it relates to the storyboards that you've seen out there. They've provided a fair bit of information as to where they're standing right now and some of the ideas that they have. And then after the presentation, what we'll do is we'll go to more of an open format where people can ask questions. And maybe what we'll do is we'll go through topics one by one rather than kind of jumping between topics so that you can ask some questions, share your concerns and ideas with respect to kind of what's there now and what you'd like to see in the future. So initially what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Mr. Holland, and he's got roughly a 15-minute presentation. All right, thank you.
Wait till you hear what I say. You may not be clapping now. Thank you for coming. I'm awestruck by how many of you wanted to come on a rainy Tuesday evening during the Canucks games and come and listen to this. This is great. I'm very honored. I hope that many of you give us feedback, that many of you connect with us, get our emails, and start a conversation, because what we hope is that this meeting is the beginning of many years of working with you on what we hope will be a great neighborhood, another neighborhood in Lanceville, because it's going to take many decades for this project to evolve and become what it can be with you. I want to acknowledge that we're on a native territory. We made contact with Chief David Bob and Councillor Gordon Edwards to start a partnership with them. We hope to begin to draw all of our groups here together. We've all been here for a while. We'll all be here for a long time working together. Again, I want to acknowledge our team. I've got some great team members here that have put this together. We've got Allard. You met Allard. Gilles is our hydro geotech for all of you who are concerned about water, and no one in Lanceville, as I understand, is concerned about water. But if you are, he knows more about water on that hillside than anyone I've met. Bob Bolthoff, who already knows all of you personally, I believe, and many of you know him. Bob is working with us on just about everything. Doug is here behind us, Doug Worley. He's just graduating from geography this year at VIU. He completed 2 3-hour exams today already and has come to do this. And Amy over here is going to be taking flip chart notes the whole time of any of your concerns. Doug is taking written notes, so we'll get everything you say down, so it's all being recorded and all being taken seriously. Amy also had major exams here today. They're in the middle. You have another one tomorrow morning. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to move forward here fairly quickly. Those of you who've had a chance to peruse, can you hear me at the back? Yeah, okay. Those of you who've had a chance to peruse the boards a little bit, most of this is revisiting some of that. I know many of you came in fairly just for this presentation, so I'll give you the quick fly through of most of this information here is what we're dealing with. So what I want to do is just overview the current status of the project. It's been sort of on a start-stop process in your lives here in this town for the last 10 years. I want to review some of the key details that triggered this conversation. There was a development agreement signed in 2007 that gave the project zoning and development rights. And last year, a new sort of memorandum of understanding was negotiated to lead to a new development agreement. It's still in process, but that was what a lot of the trigger of this conversation was here tonight. I want to go over both of those with you so you're really clear on what each of them details and the rationale behind them. The park matters to a lot of you. We've got a few things to say about the park, particularly in how we would like to start really better managing the whole process together for the use of that site. We'd like to start with that as a community task force where you work with us. We technically own the land, although a huge majority of it is going to come back to you very shortly as a park. In the meantime, we're all using it. We all need to manage it in order to avoid conflicts and mitigate fire risk and things like that. I know many of you are concerned about traffic. There's this feeling that there's about 730 homes with 4 kids in every family about to descend on you tomorrow. I want to show you a video of what development will look like in about 2030 on the busiest 90 minutes of the year, so you can see how much traffic will be there, and then we can talk about how to mitigate those impacts, especially over time. Water as well, and then just a few thoughts on the future neighborhood and how this is going to evolve. So I think most of you know the site. It's 1,838 acres, all told. It starts, this is the Hardwood entrance up here at the top, and that's the little panhandle area. This is the marsh that many of you know that the bridge is crossed. Most of the walking that's done is done in most of this area, Siwash Ridge. Here's Coakley Mountain, here's Lone Tree, or I gather it's called Bald Mountain by those some of you in Pleasant Valley. Vicon Road is down here. And this is a big network of what used to be logging roads. The last time it was logged. We're in the process of doing some work to upgrade those for your fire department so that they can access that either for emergency purposes to respond to a fire in a much more efficient way. We hope to start on that in the next few days. The history of the site, as many of you know, before 2000, it was First Nations territory, as well as, of course, in the last 100 years or so, colonial territory with resources uses. Logging has been burnt to the ground at least once or twice with wildfires. Sheep was grazed on it several generations ago, basically for recreational resource uses. Right after 2000, a group led by a fine gentleman by the name of John Clark began to turn this into what became known as Foothills Estates. And most of the work that you see up there, the roads, the planning, the subdivision pins, all of that was done under John's leadership at that period of time. And Bob had the privilege of being part of a lot of that process. So if you have any questions about that chapter, Bob was there for most all of it and can answer those questions with you. So design, engineering, the zoning was established and approved, the development agreement was approved, it had a lot of amenities and money given to landfill for downtown and other areas. And unfortunately, regardless of how much they drilled for water, they were not able to find a 50-gallon per minute well, which is the required for a production well, and as a result, they could not realize their subdivision and finish selling them, and it didn't help that the world's credit crash came and the whole thing came to an end. So they went through an unfortunate chapter in the following several years of essentially pulling this process into and then out of bankruptcy. There were several major mortgage companies that held pieces of the parcels that were part of the larger Foothills Estates. They sort of got broken apart into the different mortgage companies that held these as assets. And both of them tried to get something going unsuccessfully for a whole bunch of very good reasons. In about 2011 or so, Allard Buckleyan and the group, if you're interested in what our whole group is, I'll show you in just a moment who they are, put together Storm Mountain and came and essentially put all the parties back together, made one project out of it, and came back to Lansville and said, let's now move forward to the next chapter. And that's where it brings us through today. So last year and this year, a new memorandum was negotiated and signed that began to set the stage for what we now know as the MOU for the next chapter, and they hired a team of us to begin to get this project back up on the rails and moving forward. So who is this group? Just so you know who we are. This is a company called Storm Mountain Developments. It's a company associated with a lender that owns a number of properties. It was created to help bring them back to life and bring them back to health and begin to work with communities to develop them after the credit crash. So Allard is the CEO of that group. We've got information on the folks, happy to talk through that group with you, but there's a whole group of us. None of us own land in the foothills. We are a team that has been hired by the mortgage companies and put together in order to make this project a success and to work with you to make that a success because it's a big, long project. So our commitment, when we all put our heads together and we got the entire board, everybody you see there, basically in a room plus more people for several days a few months ago, and really had a serious heart-to-heart about what this next chapter needs to be. These are some of the commitments that came from that, essentially starting at the chair of our board and working down. So some of the commitments to you, to start by safely working with you to safely manage access to those lands starting now. So the use can continue, but we can do it as safe as possible, particularly as fire season comes on us. We intend to build a neighborhood in Lansville. This is much less in our minds of a development project. It's a small one, it can be a development project. This is too large. This is an entire piece of your town, and therefore must be seen as a neighborhood in the town. Many of you are part of community groups, the very active community. Our commitment to you is to help you and support you in your initiatives wherever we can. The downtown is critical. I've mentioned this to a number of people. You can imagine what it would be like to develop in Qualicum Beach without Qualicum Beach's downtown. It's kind of out there in the middle of nowhere. Right now, we see Lanceville's downtown as important as Qualicum Beach's downtown to the future success of all of us, and as such, we intend to put resources and energy and help into whatever we can do to help Lanceville's downtown begin to get some of the beautiful and amazing life that it has had over the last 100 years back. We intend to dedicate over half of the property to you as a park. We want to address environmental and sustainability issues. If you look at our other time, we've been talking about our backgrounds. All of us are dedicated to positive social and environmental impact for decades in our work. We are a member of the religion of water, so we will be managing our water as self-sufficient and as simply and as efficient as possible. I've never been part of a community that cares so much of this water, and I just spent half a decade planning in Peachland, and it's pretty hot, and they don't have much water up there. You take the cake. You totally beat them to it. Diversity of homes. We are all critical of the last plan because it didn't bring on enough diversity in price, in size, in type of homes. So we want to bring on a group of homes, a group of lots that much closer mirrors what Lanceville is about and what people here can afford. And finally, our commitment to the whole community is to work with you on our role on how to plan this going forward. Now, that's not intended as a sales pitch. That was from our board of directors to you. That is essentially the commitments that we are all working on as a higher team to do this. In 2007, the plan for Foothills Estates emerged as a concept plan for all 1,800 acres. Now, we worked closely with UBC. There was a lot of really idealistic and great work, an enormous number of studies. It had just been logged. I think, how many thousand trees were planted? 13,000? 25,000 trees were planted to begin to reforest the area. It was a very dedicated group of people that worked on it. This was the result. It's a little harder to see this whole area because some of it's white, but there was a fairly large area of park. There was a set of acreages designed for the middle of the park area, what we now know as the park area. There was larger lots on the two ends of it, up near Siwash Ridge and down near Vicon. There was a lot of much more generic, it's still fairly large lot residential, and a very small village in the middle. A number of the things that were going to emerge from this, there was a lot of studies that would be required before development proceeded. There was a 5,000 square foot community center that was going to be provided as well, and there was a very significant range of contributions to Ware Road, Lanceville Road, the downtown here, and the village as well that would have to proceed. So the MOU then emerged. So 7 years later, we're now back at the table again. The world has changed. A lot of things have changed. And Lanceville and the landowners got together to negotiate a new memorandum of understanding. It's signed in good faith. It's not legally binding, but to just walk away from it would be to walk away from a lot of very important conversations. That being said, a lot of it was done as a conversation between a municipality and a landowner, and I think there's a larger planning process that it was intended to follow in this process. So it was aimed at heading to a new and updated development agreement, and it had a number of extra terms that were essentially related to it. So the new terms here. Rather than in the old development agreement, where roughly 730 acres of park were dedicated on, say, day one of phase one, and another 170 would come later for a total of 900. In this one, 900 acres are dedicated in the very beginning, and another 200 acres of general fee simple community land is also dedicated over time to the community. There is no additional density. What I think there's been some misunderstanding is that we pull all the density in this plan out of the park area and bring it back down into the urban containment boundary. It does condense it and it makes it feel denser, but there's no new homes. It's still 730 homes, the same number as was originally decided upon. The Foothills, in this case, we will cover all the legal costs of the community for negotiating the MOU, negotiating the phase development agreement, all of this kind of negotiation. In addition, we will provide the community with just under $8,000 a unit in cash. Every building we build, every home we build, we send a check to the community for that process. We'll provide land for a public works yard, land for a future fire hall if it's needed up there, and we will construct a big reservoir, which we'll talk about in a moment, and give all of the water works to the community as soon as we've got that constructed. In exchange, what the developer got out of that deal was a commitment that over the next 20 years, the zoning the density allowed would stay. The council wouldn't take it apart and give less over time. It's going to hold that process, which is very common for these all across BC, that sort of sense of security so that both parties know. And then down the road, there might be a potential at council's discretion for 16 units a year of water to go to the foothills if we were not able to find enough water on our land to cover our units, which our commitment is to be as water self-sufficient as we can. So you can see some logic in this. There's been a few shifts and changes. Most of it's been updated. But that was really what was negotiated last year and came out, interestingly, about exactly parallel to when the water agreement with the 9-0 came out. So these two kind of came marching into your lives through your mailbox, and there wasn't time to have a consultation about it. And so here we are having this consultation now to start that process. So comparing them, the density is the same. We've just pulled all the density out of the park and pulled it down to the lower area with the MOU. Studies are very similar. We give 200 acres more in the MOU than in the original DA. Contributions are slightly similar and slightly different. We don't need to go into them all in detail right now. We can do it in Q&A if you want, or we can do that. And in the case of the MOU, we're providing significantly more money to the community to do with what it needs over time. In terms of the actual layout on the site, I mentioned this by waving my arms, but if we go back to it, it's a little hard to see there, but this is roughly the old plan, and you'll see the yellow dots here were generally where the development was envisioned. As we head toward the MOU, and I think where all of us want to go, we're basically taking all this density and we're pushing it to the edges of the site. So these arrows, we're bringing it back down closer into landfill, closer into the other developed areas. It makes it more efficient, less tax required for your long-term servicing of infrastructure, better smart growth, lower climate emissions, and you get a 900 to 1,000 acre wilderness park, basically, without homes in it, without roads in it, without power lines in it. In terms of planning the park, there's this conversation we just had, which is there's 900 acres of park. Fine. The question is, where does it end? Where does the edge happen? And so part of the plan here is that I just put a wiggly red line, which is not meant to represent anything. That's the point. The point is we would like to work with this task force we're proposing and work with you and our biologist. We've got Adam Compton over here as our biologist. We want to walk this area with you. We want to find out where do you use the trails, where the sensitive lily habitat is, all of these kinds of things, and figure out exactly where that boundary should be. So when we say these acreages, you've got a lot of control over exactly where that works, and everybody wins as much as possible. Which leads me to this task force. In order to most immediately manage the lands for safe access and fire mitigation at this point, and kind of begin to end right now our biggest concern is 4x4s on the site. Not because people who drive 4x4s are bad, I've got a 4x4. But the reality is that they often bring couches, a lot of beer, fire, a bunch of other things, and they go way up there and they set up. And then, well, I'll let you finish the story. So we're a little concerned about that. We're going to be moving bollards and gates up to our bridges and strengthening the Vipond gate so that hopefully we can keep the 4x4s from interacting with you when you're up there, so it's much safer. ATVs and motorcycles, most of them are extremely responsible. We'd like to support you where we can. Mountain bikes likewise, hikers, dog walkers, all of this. We want to try and basically make sure it's safe when you use the site, that it is safe, particularly for fire. So this task force is an invitation for you to work with us to help put that management plan in place. Ultimately, let's say months to a year from now, if we get to proceed, we'll be giving all of that whole pot of this land as a public park. So it will become a public park under public park management. But between now and then, we figured that safety and fire mitigation is an important way to go. And so if you would like to be part of those conversations or even be just kept updated, please do let us know. There's a sign-up sheet down at the end of one of the rows here, or just let us know. Go to our website, landfillfoothills.ca, and we're there. The current access now goes through some neighbors of ours, fabulous neighbors. They've been involved in the project for a long time. The Tavagers, Judy and Ed Tavager, they own this big piece of land right at the edge of Harwood. The current access you get through the gate is actually through their property. We're working with them because of all of the impact of all of that that's occurring to bring the access down to the end of Harwood here. So that'll be a little cleaner and maybe provide some parking areas there. It's a little safer so you don't end up stopping Lloyd and Vicky's entrance there, the Ericksons, or anybody else when you're there to go for a walk. We're currently also, this is a network of roads you see in the purple there. Bob just drove it all. I'm going to go do most of it tomorrow or the next day. We're in the process. We met with the fire chief, and we're going to be cleaning up those roads so that fire and emergency vehicles can get up there. And we're approaching a conversation. We need to name some of those roads, so if something does happen up there, you can say there's a fire on such and such a road or at such and such a kilometer, so we can at least respond and protect these lands for the future. In terms of traffic management, I know that this is an issue. Whenever a small town begins to grow, there's always a great concern about traffic, and rightfully so. So right now, the nature of the terrain is such that the first probably 50% of this project is going to have most of that traffic that comes and goes is going to come down essentially the Harwood, Halls, and Ware Road corridors. So that's really where most of that traffic is going to come. Because the earliest phases are here. As we get into the later phases, and we're talking now 10, 20 years from now, there are other roads that can be brought in, particularly Vipond, and again, those areas go into very rural areas, and we don't expect as much density down there. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but this is part of the longer-term planning process we want to work on, is how to manage that over time. But in the meantime, most of the access will come basically onto that entry bridge. We've also got an access now permitted up off Halls, although it's very steep, so we don't know if we'll use that or not. But again, it may be able to take some of the loading off of it as it gets down to the road. So traffic levels. This is a really key concern, I think, for many people. You can't see this whole grid at the back, but let me just explain what it is. The past developer, as with most developers before 2008, thought they could sell way more units than they actually could sell. So there were targets, if you look at those, if you go back to this traffic study, the projections that Nadine and her team at Boulevard were given were 50 to 100 units a year being sold. Now, if you think 2.5, 2 to 3 people per unit, that's a lot of people moving into Lanceville very quickly. You're going to double the population very quickly. Well, as we all know, none of that came to be anywhere where it was all promised. So in reality, our team is way more realistic and pessimistic about it. So we're bringing that way, way, way back. Probably what actually might happen. So we're looking at a much slower growth rate over time. So this shows 10 years. The earliest homes that we might get to a first year of, let's say, 20 to 40 homes that might be occupied is not before 2017. So 10 years from now is 2027 at the earliest. I'm going to say probably 2030. I don't know where we all are in 2030, but this is the kind of dynamic we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to show you at the peak hour, it's about 400 units, so we're about 60% of it built out. I want to show you a little video right now that Nadine put together for us of what that's going to feel like. In about 2030, on the busiest 90 minutes of the year, what it's going to be like on sort of Ware Road from our process. And we'll hope it all works here. Now what this show is number of cars per second on a road in Langford, which looks a lot and feels a lot and has the same density use based on professional engineers and consultants. The first 30 seconds are 10 years, or 2030. Full, 400 new homes on that hill on the busiest 90 minutes of the year. I'm going to let it run, and the next 30 seconds brings you basically back. It's going to add one more car, but it's over another 30 seconds. So a little bit of math there, but it basically brings you back to how busy it would be in total over a minute, one of the busiest minutes of the year, at about, let's say, 2025. And then if we work our way back from that, the final, the last 30 seconds doesn't have any cars, and that actually adds up to a total of 90 seconds, which equals essentially the development of about 4 years along the way, or about 200 homes a year. Does that kind of make sense? So I'm going to start with the first 30 seconds are the busiest it can possibly be. But then it makes some sense when I show it to you here. Come on. It always does this. We're going to only go. There's the fourth card. And now the last 30 seconds of the show. Okay, so that experience here, to work backwards, that's 200 units up to about 400 units. That's the busiest rush hour that they need to find by all of our traveling. The rest of the day is a lot less than that. So that's rush hour in 10 years, what we just saw. The reason why I did that was that numbers don't mean anything when it comes time to the experience of traffic. They become a big mess of numbers. That's what it feels like. That's what it's really like. If you live there, that's how many cars are. Switching to the next challenging topic of water. As per part of the tragedy of the original first try, they couldn't find a 50-gallon per minute production well. We have found one. Jill found one for us late last year, right here just on the other side of Copley Mountain. It's enough to provide 112 units of density for our project. Not enough to supply Lanceville with water yet, but Jill is going to be spending this summer out looking for more water to try and at least get close to our 700 units. The water infrastructure that is going to come forward with this, we're going to start with the reservoir up here, just on the side of Copley Mountain. It's enough, we'll be providing it large enough, if Lanceville gives us a green light, to handle all of your fire flows for Upper Lanceville in this part of the network. So we have 1.4 million gallon liters.
Phase one is 700,000 liters,
1.4. So you can see the green line kind of comes down our streets, and then it'll connect to the Lanceville water system, essentially at at Falls and Harwood, and service that particular area. The next question then is the housing diversity, our commitment to more affordable housing, more diverse housing. It's kind of hard to see if you saw it in the back in your handout. There's some maps. This area up here was the old lots, lot patterns. Sorry, I don't think it's in your handout. The lots were very large. Part of it is the terrain naturally leads to very large lots, but we think there's a lot of opportunities to create greater diversity and smaller pockets around how we move forward. I see a lot of red dots on this page, this board at the back. Thank you very much. We don't know what it is that you know that you need for housing. Most towns, if they get to a certain point, suddenly decide they need a bunch of different types of housing. That's what we can do. As a larger master plan community, we can bring a very unique select types of homes to meet your needs. So I'm very interested to hear what you think you need over the next 10 years, 15 years, because that's something that will greatly shape how we then build out this project. So, smaller, more single family with smaller, more affordable ones, maybe ones that are still fairly expensive because they've got super high quality but are much smaller. Medium-sized family homes to compete with all of Nanaimo and housing all of our kids. Maybe large luxury lots. There's certainly demand for a few of those for sure, probably. We were interested in the recreation, second home market. We've been unequivocally told by everyone in the know that it's a really bad idea, so we won't go there. Acreages, ranchettes. I'm not sure how many of you have horses or like a lot of room around you. And then in the other direction completely, if you're done mowing the lawn, maybe a nice townhouse would be nice, so you don't have to leave Lanceville, or even an apartment somewhere point along the way for the first time or later in the process. So moving on to the final conversation here. There is current zoning, there is a development agreement intact on the project, and we're interested in getting started on that first little chapter of just what we have water for. And simply the reason is the roads are mostly already in, the lots, the locations for homes because of the terrain are pretty much already set. There's not going to be much change no matter how much planning discussion goes on. It's basically going to be that. We would like to be able to pay the salaries, keep the lights on, and get something started for you. And then we think that the long-term conversation would be worth coming back to you about and starting looking at economic futures, looking at the environmental story of the park, spending some quality time, figuring out what all this needs to be, and then completing essentially a new phase development agreement based on that that will last much longer. Now, the lawyers can get involved, and there's lots of little details we need to work out, but that's what our hope is that we can move forward. Now, we wouldn't intend to do that without permission from council and certainly some community support for how that would move forward. So, how to be involved. Last point here, there is a website. It's just the beginning of the conversation. There's a lot more information to put up there. We rushed our team to get it up. Lanceville, Foothills.com. So anytime we'll have all kinds of notices. All the boards that you saw today are all up there for free download, and we'll put up more information. I've been handing out my cards. Mark at stormmountain.ca, you'll get to me, and the phone number that's on the card is my cell phone. Many more public meetings. If you're part of a community group and you'd like to have a serious conversation with us about something that matters to you, call me. We will come, we will meet with you, we'll have that conversation. If you just want to have a cup of coffee, you just want to go for a walk with us. We've already been doing this with many of the folks who live in the area. Call us. We'll come and have a conversation. We'll go for a walk. We'll have a cup of tea with you. Basically, at your convenience. We think this is a neighborhood that needs to be planned with you because it is really your future as much as it is ours, and maybe more so. And as such, we need to work together to get the right solution. And I'll just put up a map here on the site so that we can refer to it as a conversation.
Thanks, Mark. First off, just to be clear, with respect to the council as it exists right now, the previous council passed the MOU or signed the MOU. The new council has not considered the MOU. Recognizing, as Mark's mentioned, it's a non-binding document, but the council believed that it was important to begin involving the residents in the discussion as early as possible so that in terms of the potential of moving forward, that we understand what the concerns are, and so that not only can we address them, but also Storm Mountain can address the concerns as we proceed, as opposed to running into something in the way of a roadblock later on. So, like I said, council has not endorsed any of this. It was done at the initiative of Mr. Holland in terms of the open house. But what we want to do is we want to hear what your concerns are, and certainly the developers want to hear what your concerns are as well. It's meant to be an inclusive process. It's meant to be a discussion, a back and forth, as opposed to just, with all due respect, a lecture. And he's got a little bit of a problem on what 15 minutes is. So if we might, I'd kind of like to go through topics. Mark's brought up a number of things on his slides with regards to topics, and if we could hit kind of some of the hot button ones, and so we can hear your comments, your concerns, your questions. And there are the experts here from the developer side as to what information they have. So as we go through, we'll be able to draw on them to provide clarification for you as to where they stand. And then also from the district side, if you've got questions, we can certainly answer those as well. When this started initially back, for example, when we did the OCP in 2005, the main things that were coming up at that point were water and traffic. So if we kind of start on those two, and maybe if you want to start on water, you guys. So what concerns do you have with regards to water? What questions do you have with regards to water that haven't been addressed here, maybe can't be addressed here if there's more information needed, but we want to kind of get on record what those concerns are. So this is where it turns over to you. Unfortunately, we don't have a sound system, so if you could speak up in terms of it so people can hear, but open the floor to the residents. There we go.
So your well that you found last year proved enough water for the first phase, from what I understand. What's your prognosis for finding more water for subsequent phases, and with that you might need to come to Nanaimo via Lanceville for Nanaimo water?
Jill, I'll let Jill speak to the probability of finding water.
A few steps back. The first hole was drilled property 25 years ago. That area in 81, the first hole was drilled. So I'm not a magician and I didn't find water the first hole I drilled. I took all the information that has been collected over time. So we have now tools, knowledge, mapping facilities, GIS, that really help us to put water information together. Several challenges that we have. Quantity. Many holes have been drilled hitting 7 gallon, 15 gallon, 20 gallon. We wanted 50 gallon. Quality. Water has been found, water has been cleaned over there. Arsenic, boron present in the water. Lanceville doesn't want to treat the water. So we don't want arsenic, we don't want boron in the water. We drilled in 2013-14, we drilled 7 holes. And we found water at the 7th hole. The location is right here. And we want to have this 4 unit here is fractured bedrock. There is no sand and gravel. The sand and gravel is way down there. So we wanted good fractures, productive fractures, deep fractures. We don't want to fracture at 10 feet or 20 feet deep because that won't give us the water column that we need to get a good well. So we found some very good fractures at 200 feet, 300 feet that gave us both the quality and the quantity that we needed. We checked the quality. Every fracture that we hit, we took water samples and we analyzed for boron and arsenic and other parameters, just to make sure that there was no bad water coming to that well. Then we tested the water. We pumped it for days. One of the key issues is if you pump here, is it going to affect this zone? Is it going to affect my well here? Is it going to affect the wells in Lansville in the sand and gravel aquifer? How we do that? We install data loggers, which are devices that measure the water column in a well. And with that, when you pump from one well, you can check in neighboring wells how much the water dropped when you pump. So we did that. We had that well. We had a monitoring well very close by, and we had a series. You have seen the numerous wells that we had on the property. So we had like a dozen of those data loggers monitoring as we speak the property. We also have data loggers installed on the creek. Because if we pump the groundwater, we don't want the creek to run dry. So we have collected that information. We have analyzed that information. We have reported on that information. Based on that information, Lansville said that well is a good well. It's a 57-gallon well. The water quality is good. Go for it. Now, Tyler, you want some more water. So I'm going to take that information that I have. We have now networks of fractures. We know how they dip into the ground. And so we have other locations where we have started investigating, and we'll keep investigating until we have other good sources of water. Based on the monitoring that we have seen, the well here has a very small capture zone. We are dealing with almost like a canyon in this zone, and this is where the 1 liter of rainwater that falls over the ground gets into the ground, gets into the fracture, and provides water to that well. And we have measured the drawdown. We have measured the impact of neighboring wells. We have modeled it. We have numerical models that allow us to project what the drawdown will be in 1 year, 5 years, 50 years, 100 years from now. And so we can use these tools to best assess what is going to be the behavior of the aquifer here and here due to pumping over time. I hope I covered some ground with my information. Yes, sir.
Question was, Lansville not have enough, or was it not enough water to this development?
Lansville District? No. No, our wells are basically at their maximum supply, correct.
Could this development provide additional capacity to Lansville?
Sorry, we can't hear we can't hear that at the, we can't hear what
The question was whether or not the development could provide additional water for Lansville. At this time, in terms of anything that they've proven, no. There's not, currently, they haven't proven water adequate for the whole development. So
we don't know what we'll find. Jill will be out drilling starting very soon. So if you're out hiking, you see drilling rigs. That is Jill out there checking them.
actually, the gentleman there.
Yes, I'm Jim Clocker. I live on Pipeline Road, not in Lansville, just off. A few years ago, the Lone Tree Properties had some wells drilled on the wheat property down in the flats. Is that still, and then they're going to run a pipe up Pipeline Road to the south part of the development. Has that water been considered as part of this development?
I think it'd be best if Allard, CEO, he was part of that conversation.
Thank you for that question. When we first acquired the property, that was the first water.
A little louder, please.
When we first acquired the property, the wheat property was the first one that we continued testing, and we found a great deal of water.
The wheat property is by Brand
By the lake, yes.
Yeah. So there's a great deal of water there. In fact, it's a terrific resource, but it's the type of resource that a developer of our scale wouldn't be able to address. It's far too large an endeavor to try and bring water from a different district over through private property to our development. So it's something that we've abandoned, and that's when Jill and I started looking for water on our own property and successfully found the start of our first.
Basically an infrastructure problem, you couldn't put together the...
Political, infrastructure, it's all the things we didn't want to address.
Me? I was wondering how that will affect Bayview Park Drive where we are on wells.
Bayview Parks.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned,
Just that other area?
yeah, we have wells here that we also monitor, and the drawdown, the effect of pumping on that well was really limited to a very small zone. We haven't monitored any effect in any of the wells that were quite distant from our packet well.
That's fine, that's all I want to know.
Right. I was wondering, I think the limit that you set was half a gallon per minute per unit. Right.
Standard.
So the 50-some gallons per minute that you've discovered, so far would supply 100 units, more or less.
112.
With all the drilling that's been going on over the years, to get enough for 700 units would be, you'd need 300 and some gallons. So you would have to almost multiply the number you have by 6 or 7 more of those wells, and that seems to be reaching a bit, considering all the drilling that's been going on over the years and never discovered that much. So I'm just thinking that in the future, it looks like there's going to be a dependence on a supply of water through land.
Yeah, it's very hard for me to tell, Mark and others just, in a year we'll have the other 6 wells that we need. We'll do it one well at a time. We know the challenge of the land, and we are not the first to work. We have been fortunate to be successful, and we'll do our best to find more water.
Is it possible maybe, or maybe is it already looked up to collect rainwater in storage on the property, in landscaping and stuff?
The question revolved around, I believe, rainwater harvesting, using rainwater.
On the project scale, so not just per house? But
Not per house, but on larger scale.
So, good question. We do get quite a bit of water here. I think we could be able to do that. Rainwater requires a full municipal treatment program because once it falls from the sky, it hits the roof, it's any surface. It's considered essentially just the site of sewage by the planning code. So it essentially has to be completely retreated even though it just comes off the roof. So at this point, we don't have a plan to do that. We believe in Jill's magic nature. We're hoping he can find some new wells. If we get further down this road and find that there simply is not enough groundwater to be able to meet the commitment of the units, then we're going to circle back and have a conversation about that. In the meantime, it is our intention to put rainwater capture, barrels, and many other water uses in the short term, because you can capture rainwater and use it for irrigation, then you're allowed to do that. And so we intend to do that, to try and take the irrigation load as much from the potable water supply as possible, along with a lot of measures for efficiency. So we're going to try and match your impressive record of very, very few liters per person per day. We'll harvest as much rainwater as we can, but a wholesale, I've been part of projects to try to supply them here on the coast with just the rainwater. It's a very, very costly and major infrastructure project that requires private utilities and a lot of investment in that. So if we get there and that's the only option, then we'll seriously consider it. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to push for groundwater.
Great back.
Yeah, 2 quick questions. Have you initiated dye testing in your preferred flow paths to map out better your your fractured flow environment? Best way to do it. And also, second question, have you considered a small-scale impoundment to again recharge your aquifer, your fractured flow environments? Obviously, you're dealing with limited aquifer material in your fractures. And one concern I'd have is this: over a year or two of pumping a fractured flow environment, that you guys start migrating the arsenic and boron into your production wells. Clean now may not be clean in a year or two. Obviously, with all the arsenic in the well there, you know that it's pervasive and it will move, but it will move in the fractured flow environment, so that's why it's important to map that out closer. And dye testing is certainly, that's the gold standard for mapping in fractured flow.
Regarding the artificial recharge through a dike or an impoundment, etc., it has been considered in the past, not for this development. First, we'll try to see what nature gives us in terms of the network of permeable fractures in the ground. Regarding the change of quality with time, this is something that we monitor when we do long-term pumping tests. We look at trends in terms of water quality. The more you pump, definitely the larger the zone that will provide this water will get. However, for every days of pumping, the little annulus that you add is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So in terms of the rate of trend will slow down with time. Early in the process, you see in which direction you are going, if the water getting better or getting worse. And right there you'll know. And then there will be monitoring programs in place to follow up and check the water quality over time.
So you've got a plan if the water quality gets worse then?
We know right now the type of trends, where we stand, and we can project over a long period of time, yes.
Again, are you depending on modeling to do that?
On analytical results, lab chemistry, and groundwater flow modeling, correct. These are the best tools that we have. These are the standard tools and the accepted tools that we have.
Yeah, my concern with the modeling is in a fractured flow environment like we're in here in the hillside, that modeling is great when you're working in a homogeneous sandbox, but in a fractured flow environment, it's not very helpful really. And so my concern is that you're going to pump on that big well and you're going to draw it in. You're going to draw other things in that you don't want in there. So that's why I'm curious about the recharge, other than letting it naturally recharge, try to redirect it.
Now keep in mind with regards to the district standpoint, we'll have our own individuals responsible for the infrastructure to look at those concerns. So those concerns have been registered and recorded. So we'll make sure that those get looked at on a technical basis so that we understand what could potentially happen in the long term. Go on. That's what Colson gets last. There you go.
Have you established the source of the water, or where is it coming from?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have a very fractured, almost canyon-like system in the area immediately upland from that well. So we believe that the key fracture network providing water to a well is associated with this very broken bedrock in the area, as I showed roughly here.
So where is that being fed from? Do you have any idea?
It's mostly precipitation.
It's precipitation. And how about the quality of aquifer? Is there any establishment of that? I have two wells, and I'm on the route drive.
Yeah.
One is in gravel, and the log says it's a quality of aquifer at 92 feet. And my other well, which you're talking about gallonage, I got 100 gallons a minute of rock and fraction. So I got 125 gallons per minute on my factory.
Right. You're a very fortunate man.
I think of that.
When I was talking to some other individuals, one of the questions that came up, there's the question of where's the water coming from. The question that was raised by an individual is where is that water going to? Because their question was if it's intercepted there and pumped for use, is there somewhere kind of downstream that's being affected? And that was a question given to me by a resident who was here earlier. I was just curious.
I see. You have to consider water as a flux. Okay, it comes from somewhere and it moves somewhere. So we'll take some, but it will be part. I mean, there will be as much coming in, and there will be almost as much coming out. There will be a percentage which is going to be used, but people are going to use this water to, water the garden. So part of the water is going to return back to the subsurface, going to go back to the bedrock. So in terms of net use, net extraction, the human use is actually relatively small. Most of the use actually will be, for irrigation and for gardening. This is probably in a home where most of the water will be used. Yeah.
My question is about if you've got enough water for 112 lots now, what happens if you don't find more? Does that mean the development will stop? The 16 lots per year possibility through landfill is a very, very controversial issue in the community. A lot of people that are on wells right now do not appreciate that a new development gets a priority over helping them with their current well situation. So what is the plan if you don't find any more water? Does the development stop? Does it get put on hold till you find more? Or are you coming and knocking on Lansville's door for those 16 hookups a year?
So it's a good question. It's a hypothetical question because when we find out what Geo finds in the next round of drilling, we'll have a better sense if he finds some very productive wells, then we're okay. If it's not, so right now, one thing you'll find about developers is we are pessimistically optimistic. So I'm hoping that he's going to find some good water. He's optimistic about his understanding of the fractures. If there is more up there, that there's actually a lot up there. The question is can we find a 50 gallon per minute threshold well? There's actually a lot of water coming down there. And any of you who live down there, there's a lot of granite in the bed. This is a tiny. So we're hoping we'll find more. If at the end of the summer we spend a bunch of money and haven't found more production wells, we're going to have to circle back and figure out what that actually means. With respect to the actual 16 units that we come and talk about that was before my time. I don't know the actual answer. I don't know if Allie wants to talk to it, but it's certainly part of the negotiation. It's the contract that's now between Nino and Lansville. It is part of the sign down. Did you want to offer a comment on that?
Well, just the MOU itself is non-binding. So in terms of one of the reasons for this meeting tonight is to hear those concerns and get those concerns on record with respect to it. What the developers choose to do if they can't find water is up to them, but the district council answers for the residents. So
I wanted to add a point here. There is also the arbitrary number, 50 gallons. There is no real rationale for that. If you don't have water, and if I give you a 40-gallon well, you say, I like that 40-gallon well. We have a 40-gallon well. Right here. We have water here. We have like a 30-gallon well here.
That's good quality.
Right? And the quality here is just fine. Great water. And this is just a 6-inch well. Right? So we are going to drill more in this area.
But our standards currently with regards to an acceptable well is 50 gallons a minute. Whether or not that gets varied is still going to be a discussion.
So there's two discussions here. One is there water? And if we do extract it, will it have seriously negative impacts? The second one is a whole layer in there, which is essentially the standards of bureaucracy of that water that is there. So we can't meet all of the standards and check marks, then everyone has a conversation to find out we want to meet those standards, we want to, what other kind of scenarios. Right now, we're to be optimistic that we're going to proceed on that one. If we're here, this is 2015, if we're here in 2016 having the same conversation, it will sound a little bit different.
I'd like to know how deep is that well when you found the water?
The question is how deep was the well when we found the water? Yeah.
we drilled down to 600 feet. But most of the water was found between 200 and 400. This is where most of the good producing fractures were.
What is the very difference from, say, Normal Drive and where you are elevation? Really big.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a midpoint. It's not too high, not too low. By giving some good elevation reference, we can provide you.
We can get you that.
Do you know whether you're in the stage fracture?
We can get you that information. There's another individual there.
Is there an idea of what the balance is between the amount of rainfall that falls in a year on this property and what 730 units will use in a year?
So the question was, what's the difference between the total draw that 730 units would have over 1,838 acres versus actually how much rain falls on 1,838 acres?
I don't have the numbers, but it will be a very, very small fraction. So I think once again, what we want to do, we don't want to create any stress on the creeks. If possible, we want to have the smallest environmental water footprint to have the property. So going back to your question, if you just look at rain, and if you take all the rain and connect it to pipes, we have water for thousands of connections.
What I mean to say is that with all the rainwater that falls on this property, there's more than enough that will find its way out of the property to other wells and whatever around. Or it should be.
For that calculation, you go to cubic meters.
Yeah.
So 730 hectares. So hectares is essentially 100 meters by 100 meters. It's a lot of land, and then if you add a whole meter deep of water on top of that, to break that down into liters, it is a phenomenal amount of water that's falling on that site, way more than the most wasteful 730 units in the world could possibly when you think about extraction.
Marilyn?
I was concerned with all the drilling that's going on there, and they're going into all these active aquifers. Water's going to take the easiest path. How is it going to interfere with our wells that we have down? Some of us down on Normal Drive, we don't have a whole lot. So I'm concerned about that.
So you're concerned about the drilling program itself, not
Yeah,
necessarily
interfering
the
with the way the water flows. You know, they're breaking into the aquifers, they're changing the flow of the water.
So the question, if you couldn't hear it, about all the drilling, is it breaking through first water layers, through fractures, and causing big changes in water that may affect the well somewhere else?
There are regulations in place, but the new regulations are put in place in 2004. And that requires seal to be put in place in the upper portion of the well to prevent any migration of runoff and surface water, potentially dirty water getting along the casing and reaching aquifers and fractures at depth. And in the case of the production well, we were extremely conservative because we really wanted to seal off any connection with surface. So we went quite deep and quite thick with the seal in order just to make sure that we were only dealing with the fracture. And the seal.
I think it's a different question. The question is not the top. It's if you go between a fracture of 200 feet and a fracture of 300 feet, by puncturing the rock between 200 and 300 feet, does it take water out of the 200, maybe 200 feet for us, and it runs down into somebody else's well, and we suddenly drill a hole and it all drains down into 300 foot aquifer. Is that more of the question? Yeah. So does that make sense?
I do.
Yeah.
I think that's
Poke holes through the paper hole in here.
yeah. It's a hard question.
Well, it's a simple yes or no.
It's really a question of the surface contacts, how much in terms of area will there be in terms of contact, and then the gradient under which pressure the flow will move from one aquifer to another aquifer. So it's not a simple question.
I realize the answer is difficult because of the technical side, but if I can kind of shrink it down, I think your question is, could it affect it?
Yes. Absolutely.
It's good that it's a function of the density of the well, and we are still dealing, we have many wells, but we don't have hundreds of wells. If we had 50, 100, 500 wells, I would say I'm against fracking, and I'm against the 500,000 wells, oil and gas wells that we have, because I believe that vast a certain density of wells, you have a chance of creating pathways in the subsurface on which you have no control.
So the answer is yes, but there's a question about density and probability. Yeah.
Probability as well.
So there's maybe allow one more. Number of questions about water. Some of the ways that you can get your questions answered, there's sheets for filling out in terms of questions, comments. You can do that. Mr. Hollins provided his email address. Also, you can go to lanceville.ca website. All the councillors' email addresses are there. You can certainly ask questions as well. It doesn't have to be tonight. So maybe we'll have one more on water, and then we'll talk about traffic, because a number of people have expressed concern about traffic flows.
The proposed dam, the reservoir, the bottom left, where does that come to play?
Oh, this here?
Yeah.
Well, that's a marsh. That's a wetland.
No. You were mentioning that you were building a proposed dam. Reservoir.
Oh, reservoir.
Yeah, enclosed reservoir, not a
It's a wide reservoir. It's a big concrete structure. It'll be on the backside of Golden Mountain.
Okay, so not an open pond where you can draw
No, it's a big seal.
If you go up the road, is there existing one? It's the same kind of idea.
No fishing.
Okay, so if we can move on to traffic concerns. I see there's somebody wearing a Canucks jersey, so we won't ask the score. Right? Traffic concerns, questions, comments, that sort of aspect. Yes? Okay, if you're headed out, and try and keep it quiet here. I apologize for not having a sound system, but there's a question about traffic in relation to Halls Road.
So the video was the additional traffic that our project would add, but it's not based on showing what you have. The Dean has all the numbers there now, so I'm going to turn it to the Dean for all the traffic.
So I'm from the 2012 district.
Quiet back there. Good quiet. Yeah. You guys can take your conversation just down into the hallway a bit. That would be great, just because it's kind of hard to get.
And there's some more chairs up at the front now. If anybody wants to have a seat. So you'll be leaving after water. Unusual. So 2012, the district did a transportation study, which my company did as well. So we did PM peak hour counts along Ware Road and Alt. So right now, or in 2012 PM peak hour, traffic volumes along Ware in the section of Alt were in the range of 90 to 110, 120 per hour. So about year 3 would be equivalent to what is there today.
So our project then, some of your questions like how much more is it going to be, is that right? So they're 90 to 120 an hour now. Is that halfway through what we showed there, let's say another 200 units, that's going to be another...
Just over double what's there.
What's there now? Okay. Yeah. And then so 10, so 20, 30 now, at halfway through, 60% through, that's about 400 units.
3 and a bit more than what's there.
That's a lot of traffic.
So what you've got now, 5 years of development.
So you're saying instead of 120 cars a minute, you're saying 480 cars a minute? Per hour. 120
goes plus 400, 520.
520 an hour.
Per hour.
Basically, at peak hour, at that peak 90 minutes, that's not all day long, it's just between basically 4 and 5:30 in the afternoon. Every additional home that is built in this area will add 1 car per hour within that zone. It's basically direct.
So I'll explain that. I have information on that. So we've been working on this project since way back in the beginning, as well as my historical career. Plus, we have manuals. They go back way beyond my age. They give us historical data for daily and PM peak hour traffic for single-family houses. So using the historical data for 40 years, which is sites all across Canada and the U.S., the PM peak hour is 1 trip per single-family house per PM peak hour. We then, in 2004, 2005, when we started working on this project, we actually picked several different neighborhoods in the North Nanaimo, Lansville area, actually counted them to see what does Lansville actually generate compared to a North American number, because North America is quite a bit different than Lansville. As well as I've done this in a number of projects over the last 15 years as well. Came out at 1.03. So, and if you think about it this way, and I would put it in terms of my neighborhood, I live in Saanich in Victoria, I live in a neighborhood, I actually have a tenant, we own 2 cars, he goes to work at 6, I go to work at 8, our peak hours don't overlap with each other. My neighbor across the street has 5 kids. They don't drive them, but they have 2 cars. Again, they don't overlap. The car next door, they have 4 cars. They generate 4 trips in peak hour. When you start to add us up and average us, you come out at 1, or very close to. So entire neighborhoods don't fill up with every household full of 4 cars, and even if they do, not everyone drives out all at 4 o'clock and all back in. So it does spread out, and the average is 1 per PM peak hour on average.
So in terms of the experience, for every 60 homes built in the Foothills, you'll have 1 more car per minute. So we watched 90 seconds there. Well, I'm going to trust the engineer, that's fine. If you don't want to trust the engineer, that's fine. So based on those numbers, you'll get 1 car extra a minute for every 60 homes built there in that peak hour. It will add more traffic. Obviously, growth and economic development always brings traffic. No way around it. It always does.
So with that, is your concern about the amount of traffic related to the a little bit of questioning of the numbers in terms of that, and fully respect that. So maybe in terms of the kind of illustration, we can get more information, and therefore so people can understand to a greater level what the potential impact would be. Does that sound fair?
And we'd be very, if you live on those roads that are going to be impacted, I'd be very, give me an email, give me a call, we'll arrange to come down and meet with you and talk with you how those things are going. It looks like there's some really big issues that we can help with, and I'll be very happy to find out.
I live on Bayview Park Drive, and it's a dead-end street. There's a little shoot-off called Fawn, and it's a dead end. And we were told, what was it, a few months ago, that you plan to open that Fawn up as a road and take away the dead-end road from Bayview Park Drive and make it a full way out to the highway. And I don't want it, and I'm not alone in that. Okay. I live on there because it is a dead-end street.
That's actually, what you're talking about is not in the Foothills area. Mm-hmm. It's a separate area over.
But it's all on your business of changing Lansville, isn't it?
Well, not related to this. What there was is part of that traffic study. There was a suggestion of connecting that in terms of onto the end of Southwind, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that related to some properties that were in between, which is why in that respect it hasn't occurred as the date. But that's a separate discussion, separate day. Currently there's no plans on actually like pushing it through today or anything like that.
If I don't plan on it today, but what about 5 years down the road?
Well, that's something that council would look at. It's nothing to do with Foothills.
But it's nothing that you have in mind right now?
It's not on our books right now.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Yes.
We live on Railroad, or on also right by where Railroad is, and I guess it's believed that people would go down Railroad to get to the highway, but they don't. They come and put down off-road, and we're right at the corner, and it's a blind corner, and I can just imagine, like right now, you have to really watch yourself so you don't get hit, because people come putting down. They don't go down Railroad, because you have to go over the railroad tracks, you have to go through 2 lights, so it's much easier to go down off-road. And I'm just imagining other 200, 300, 400 cars
between Ware and Harwood? Or are you on Gibbs?
We're expanding.
Okay.
It's already a nightmare. Yeah, it's already a nightmare. So I can't imagine, that many cars in addition.
If you want to get in touch with me through, give you my card, I'm happy to talk with you to get a better sense of what those problems are.
And you did identify in the previous plan that upgrades to that intersection definitely need to happen. That intersection is a problem.
But they did upgrades. They changed it. It doesn't make any difference. People just have to turn sharp. Yeah, they still do it. They don't go down their road. The lights aren't helpful, and the railroad tracks are not helpful on Ware Road.
I'd be very happy to come talk to you about that because there's been how it's impacting you and we can look at some
kind of a bigger discussion about, you kind of opened it perfectly in terms of, so there's this idea that people will head down Ware Road and then they'll take a left or a right onto the highway. And what we heard in that, and we also did hear back in 2005, 2006, 2007, were those people that were headed to Alts to go to Woodgrove or whichever, and whether or not there's ways to encourage, might be the best word, for those people to head directly down Ware, as opposed to making it closer. Because as you expect right now, you feel that another people are named in that term.
Ware is definitely much more capable of carrying traffic than all the solves in their line road.
Sir.
Yeah, I live on Alls Road, just 2 doors down from Alls there. You say by your studies, 40 homes will have 1 more vehicle per peak hour. But the majority of those homes are going to have 2 vehicles, so you're looking at 80 vehicles that are traveling at different times during that day. Now, 112 homes for the first phase, that's 224 vehicles on average traveling up and down that road twice a day. So now my street, I purchased my home, it was a quiet residential street. It's going to turn into a main thoroughfare, which drops my property value as well as the number of other people on the road. That's really discouraging to people that live in that stretch of road. As well as having that traffic at that stop sign. I don't know if we're going to putting a roundabout in Harwood Falls. You put a stop sign there, now you have traffic backed up at that stop sign.
So the Harwood Knolls, I'll take a crack at that. In terms of the multiple cars and multiple trips, I'll leave the engineer's description as to no matter how many cars you have, it doesn't mean that all the cars are all exiting at the same time.
No, not at the same time. Throughout the day.
Over the course of the day, absolutely. But what we're talking about here is peak. The busiest 90 minutes of the day or of the year is what we're talking about, not over the whole day. There will be more cars over the whole day, but it's spread out over time when there might not be any cars for a long period of time. So I'm just clarifying. I'm not in any way saying what you're saying isn't true. I'm saying that this conversation was just about that peak hour. In terms of the all-Harwood intersection, we purchased the blue house on the corner and had it moved up to where'd it go? Union Bay. Union Bay. So it'll move to Union Bay in March. We are going to not put a roundabout. The 2 existing roads will come together. We're going to put the road through that corner so that there's a little that back, there's not the roundabout, there's not the lights, there's not all that back up, there won't be a stop sign. So it's going to move so it'll run smoothly so you won't hit the backups.
But that corner is like 1 house away. And it's like, it's still going to have traffic, and our property value is going to go down a lot.
So I'd be very happy to come and meet with you and talk with you about what you see as those impacts and see what we can do.
Yeah, because it is, but it's going to drop the value of our home.
Gentleman back.
I live up in the top end of Falls, and I've made a decision for myself probably in the last year or 2 to not drive Alls Road, because today it's dangerous. First you have to really work, because I think lots of us drive too fast, to slow down. It's sort of that kind of road that invites it. There was actually a head-on collision on that road a year or so ago with some injuries. I go straight down Ware when I'm exiting Upper Lansdale. I think it's a lot safer, obviously, but coming back, I will go Alls, because the left turn scares the heck out of me. You know, you got a major vehicle driving by you. Actually, what prompted that was my son that a vehicle went by us at 100K while we're sitting stopped at the left turn lane, and it just horrified him. He's sitting in the passenger lane, and I just decided I'm not going to do that again. It's just too scary. So that's the going out, and that's the coming back. And one more point. Our first passenger is going to be in this ship for how long? We're not dealing with residential vehicles. So your number last time, we're dealing with construction vehicles. And so construction vehicles running on Alls Road, I don't drive my passenger car on Alls Road anymore. Oh no.
Very good point. Very good point. We're going to take that down. I think it's a great point.
Yeah.
That we need to deal with the construction folks and really make sure that they stay off Alls Road. That's a very good point.
You're talking for years, concrete trucks, delivery trucks, contractor vehicles, constantly up and down our street.
Yes.
On top of the residential traffic you're having.
Yeah, another question concerning the Vipon Road end of the development. I've noticed on the phase 1 here ends in a cul-de-sac at sort of the top of Scenic Road. It appears to end in a cul-de-sac, and that implies to me that it's not going to be a through road to the other phase, and that phase 2 or whatever will have access from Vipon Road. And
The question is, on the current plans, at the end of phase 1, it shows a cul-de-sac.
Yes.
In fact, that's correct. It's actually a temporary gravel cul-de-sac with temporary parking, because we feel that what's going to happen in the long term is people that now park at the end of Harwood and walk are going to drive through to the end of Scenic Drive and walk. So what we'll do is, in the short term, provide a cul-de-sac there and a bit of parking, and then when phase 2 goes, we'll just keep moving that down the road. So,
what does it imply, though, for Vipon Road in the end, as the other phases, especially the one at the south end, gets done? Does that mean that you're going to intend to use Vipon Road for access, for construction, for general access to the other phases?
So when we get, the answer is yes, with a simple answer. The question is timing. We expect it to take at least 20 years, maybe 25 years. If we can sell 20 units a year, that's going to more than 30 years before we get down into the Vipon area. Essentially, we're going to work our way this way, because if we're within the urban containment boundary, which we don't have a line on here, we're not allowed to do well and septic. It has to be hooked into the community water and sewer systems. So that means we're going to work our way slowly and incrementally this way, because you're not going to leak, you're not going to run kilometer of sewer out to someplace else. So we would work our way this way. So essentially this would be the very last process. So we're going to be looking at 2040 before we begin to get working down in the Vipon area. That's as we
Just a couple of extra little questions about it. Picola Creek runs through that area. And if there's going to be development, those of us on Vipon Road who have water wells that basically are Picola Creek, are somewhat concerned about the water, especially runoff from residential stuff. And finally, just a little question. Back in the day, before any of this started happening, we were able to ride our horses up through the area quite a lot. And it's difficult at best to even walk up there to jump over the gate and stuff. I'm wondering if that might be an amenity you consider, be some sort of a thing where people could run their horses through.
Absolutely. I would love to talk with you about that, especially as part of this task force. I'd like to get you able to get your horses on the right way.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is a bit way out there and long distance in the future, but the intersection of Alls and the highway, even with Aspen Road traffic at this point, we can get backed up 2 or 3 ways. So is that Nanaimo or is that landfill?
It's actually technically in Nanaimo, and it's actually even more technically owned by the Ministry of Transportation. So
where does that leave us with that?
It leaves us with some significant lobbying to the Ministry of Transportation as public, and hopefully this BC on the Move gets us somewhere. Traffic engineers have very big hopes for it, but yeah, it's a significant issue. A lot, it's just saying the mayor that Superior and Ware in the 2012 those really need to be looked at by the ministry. They have some substandard issues currently. They really need to be improved. even though Superior isn't part of this development, for landfill, in terms of safety, it needs to be looked at by the ministry, and maybe some push from the district politically might help.
You're talking about if you're coming up from Victoria to turn on the holes.
Yeah, from the
Yeah, so right there at the mall intersection
Just
there.
can't handle it.
Coming out, we can have to wait till you can get on the highway going south, just at the right times, right?
Yeah, just in the peak
Long
hours.
term, but another 20 cars makes a difference. More like
There, the area where you're putting phase 1, right? On the opposite of the road? Okay. There is access to it from Phantom Road and from Royal Avenue. There's gates on both of those. Any pulling the road through there?
Yes, we are looking at those. There's a couple. This was sort of as we move. When I mentioned as we kind of move along, then we'll look at those accesses. Phantom comes in. Phantom provides some very significant challenges to get up into the area because it's quite steep. It comes into that gravel pit. Already the scenic drive is already built up there. We're going to look at it as other. We're going to look at what we can do with that. We're going to use some of the over time.
Split the traffic, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, we don't want to use Phantom as because Phantom basically can channel a bunch of traffic down into those properties all the way, or goes a long ways around and come back again, and ends up very close again in. I think the Royal ones in here certainly bear some potential in the future. We haven't modeled all of that. We haven't worked on that. And part of that is that we haven't done kind of the updated design. You heard me talk about the current lot layout and all those. These first phases of all the roads are pretty well set, but as we move further into here, not so much. So I think we need to do a lot more design. That's kind of what that planning process that I'd like to do with the community over time would be to look at how all of that would work and spend the time required. Really what we're looking at for our phase 1 is just this little area right in here. The road's already blasted into the rock and we're not going to go back up.
Another.
Actually, I was going to mention the Phantom Road too. There's also the hydro station. There's a road in there. And a lot of this development will actually be in the Nanaimo, right? It's not all in Lanceville anyway, or is it?
I believe it's all in Lanceville.
It's all in Lanceville. And so down in the bottom corner, that's Bipon, right?
That's right.
And what about those other roads? Does that come out on Dumont?
Down here?
Down through
This
there?
one comes out on Dumont. Yeah. So it's very close to the border, but it is all within Lanceville.
So you could actually, if the traffic got spread out a little bit.
That's our goal.
And it is. That's the plan.
I just wanted to be very honest with you about the phase 1, the first few years of development. I don't want to pretend that they're going to travel over a light pond or a gravel road. We're dealing with truth and fact, and that's going to be that most of this is going to use the Harvard Road to start with. And that's why I wanted to show you what that model is.
At the back there.
What's your estimated time period on looking for water?
Looking for water, back to water. We've got a contract for Gilles for this summer, so we're just in the process of getting the water drilling started. And I expect we'll drill probably for a good deal of the summer, unless Gilles finds an artesian well, like Old Faithful or something like that, we can stop. Otherwise, I expect this is going to be a full summer.
Any other specific?
Is on the back end of the development, and it will be more accessible. And we're wondering how we're going to generate
So there's a question here from the front about, since the park and a lot of the recreation areas are way, which is basically this whole section of the site, how do we get there? So yes, the way right now, I mean, you can get through White Pond to walk in there. And what we want to do is we can open that up so it's a little easier to get through, not for vehicles in the short term, but for other modes. And then, as Bob had talked about, as soon as we start interior construction, then we'll start moving parking lots along as we go. So you can come through that and you can park, because having you walk through construction zones is probably unwise for all concerned. So we'll try and find a way. In some cases, we may, maybe a bit of a longer way around in the short term if we've got a bunch of, just like roads get blocked off for construction. But our goal will be to try and provide as much for you as we go, provide areas for you to park.
Okay, and
second part of my question is that during the construction phase, access is going to be more readily available for kind of vehicle traffic that don't want to store there, by virtue of the fact that, you know, it's under construction, you've got new built, you will have properties being built, you'll have construction traffic going back and forth. So, you know, what kind of measures will be in place to secure all that area against the kind of intrusive traffic that you are presently advising to keep up?
So the question is as construction proceeds a few years from now, as we start working up here, the bollards and gates come out, and there's all these roads being built and stuff happening, how do we keep essentially damaging 4x4 activity off that drain, is essentially opening it up? It's a very good question. In some cases, they're probably going to get through. The one thing about construction sites is there's usually a security program detailed in place because there's a lot of equipment on place. The other thing is that there's a lot of eyes on the street, as we would say. There's a lot of people moving around there. Sometimes they're working at night on construction sites. So when the counterbalance to opening up the road is we can still close them off as we go, but there'll be a lot more people around. Right now, there's basically Bob and a few of you are the neighbors. Give Bob a call and say, there's somebody who's driving a truck over a tree, and can you come out and deal with it? At this point, we'll have, like our security guys do once a day, which could loop through there. It's just big issues. In this case, there's people around all the time. There'll be multiple construction companies, and they'll all make sure there's security there. So basically, the people control is going to take over what is otherwise going to be a terrorist control.
Am I right in assuming that infrastructure and construction will only take place in the same places that the general, you know, residential construction is planned? So you will have, you know, your construction taking place on roads, sewers, all those kind of utilities that are on the ground. They will only be doing it on the same basis to serve the properties in the area.
So the question in this case was, how will the construction of infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, coincide with the areas that homes are being developed on? That's right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So generally, the construction of the pipes and the roads and the wires and everything happens in as short and as close process to the homes. And the reason is very simple, as I'm sure you all know, the money comes in from selling the homes and the lots, and until the money's in, or they need to come because constructing all that is about a road today, roughly $1,000 a linear foot for a basic road, so with pipes in there. So you don't want to be spending too much of that unless you've got some houses attached to your selling. One exception to that would be at the very beginning. At the very beginning, we need to get water to these areas, and the water starts up here. And so even if we build our first home down here, we have to start by building the water here, and then we have to run that water line all the way down so there's water on site for that. So in the very first phase, there will be some, we won't build all the roads, we won't build all that, but there will be some pipes that are being put in the ground, and the reservoir, community reservoir built. It'll happen a little bit earlier. Then after that, we will try and keep them as close as possible. That especially goes as we start working out over the next 20 plus years, working our way down slowly across the block. Does that answer your question? Yes, sir.
There was an earlier question about how to control some of the 4x4 traffic as construction takes place. I would almost suggest a little bit more enforcement of allowable noise levels. I live on Ware Road, and I have never in my life heard so many unlicensed motorcycles and ATVs roaring up and down the street, trucks coming up on the weekend with no mufflers on them, really way above normal acceptable levels. So perhaps a little bit of enforcement in the Alls Road, Ware Road area of the type of traffic that's being allowed in would help mitigate some of those problems.
Certainly their expectation is to eliminate the 4x4 type traffic, which will lessen the incentive for people to be going
Let's stick the word mufflered in there.
Yeah. Another thing with regards to the licensing and enforcement side of things is as of June 1st, ATVs and those sorts of things are going to be required to be licensed in BC, so they will have to be displaying a plate.
So even now, currently, they're not supposed to be driving on city streets,
well,
and they are.
I realize that, but the ability to enforce, for example, is based on being able to identify the individuals, unless you've got, for example, a cop sitting right there. So certainly with regards to the traffic that goes up as of June 1st, as people begin to comply, making notes of those plates and being able to pass them on gives us the ability to enforce that to a greater extent.
In terms of the noise of ATVs, motorcycles are legal on the road, they're licensed. ATVs, not so much. If we can provide some better services at the Harwood entrance, then it's unlikely someone's going to park somewhere else, in which case the noise you're hearing near is probably your neighbors. And again, if there's parking and it's more convenient, they might truck their ATV up there before they come roaring up past the place.
That's no problem with that, as long as they run a muffler
Sure.
I heard mention of access up where, if like say where road went straight up from the highway into the development, and then it would have a very low impact, I would think, on the surrounding community and the way it is right now.
So we've looked at that a little bit. So rather than sort of come up where, and then rather than winding around Halls to Harwood, then come in, you're talking about going straight up.
Yeah.
So there is an opportunity for us to come into the corner of this panhandle piece off that intersection.
Yeah.
The problem that we run into, unfortunately, is to get from there to here, we have to go back down over a whole new bridge environment and up about a 30% slope or a 40% slope to get up there. So it makes it very difficult for us to actually move this traffic through that area. We might be able to take some of it off just for this part of the panhandle piece, and we're looking at that. It's fairly steep, requires a lot of blasting, would not be that friendly with the good folks on Halls right around us. It is potentially possible. We've talked with the public works officer about that. So it is potentially an alternative for just the population in that little area, but we really can't do much else. I know some folks have suggested that our good friend Bob Wolfbach give up his property for a highway to his land. He wasn't so keen on that one.
Is that property available to extend off the top, off where up to you?
Right through there?
Yeah, it's just like the slope.
Yes.
Well then, blast it.
That can only serve a few units in this area. It can't take the load off this area just because of all of that. It's a canyon. It's a canyon with a wetland at the bottom.
There is access on the swamp line to get across the bridge.
There's a little bit right there. Yeah.
You don't have to go up that second slope. You can go around the swamp and then come in by here, which would take the traffic away from all the residents on all the bridges.
Just wondering about this cost of snow removal, because where we live, which is right near there, we get snow and nobody else does.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine driving those roads up with the snow, but we do get snow. So that cost is going to be borne by the landfill. And that's going to be an area that's going to get snow.
The question had to do with snow removal, and yes, currently as it stands right now, that would form part of the snow removal budget of the district.
You would take the taxes from all the new homes, and that becomes part of the services that they're paying taxes for. If some of the roads become strata roads, which has been on the discussion, then the owners of those strata roads means the road is actually owned by the owners, it's not owned by the municipality. Where some of the clusters of homes have strata roads, that no maintenance will be their personal responsibility to take care of together. But these major streets, most of the municipality want to own the major streets, so they have control of the major streets. So they exchange the taxes of the new homes to cover the cost of maintenance.
And that was going to be my point. That's something that Lanceville citizens have to consider in the long-term planning here, is the burden on our taxes and our cost in the municipality with all the infrastructure that's going to be up there. It's going to, because of the steepness and the grade and the things up there, it's going to present challenges that we haven't had to deal with in most of Lanceville currently. And it's my understanding that in a lot of cases, the taxes that come in from a residential unit or property don't necessarily offset the cost to service and upkeep the service. So that was a big concern for me, is how is that going to be balanced, because that's something that we will all be paying for.
So you'll be paying, the question then is the percentage differential, if there is one, different, the road lengths per home here versus Lanceville Road or any other road in Lanceville. So your current, under that logic, every home in Lanceville does not pay its fair share any more than these will pay its fair share. So it just means the taxes are being distributed. So the question is, if we end up with a much greater road length and maintenance cost up here per home than you end up with here, then there's a question of a transfer of money. Otherwise, these will be paying the same amount, or they'll be the same ratio as any other home. Any of the same ratio.
Okay, so last one related to traffic.
We were talking about ownership, I'll leave it for a moment.
Okay. So there's a number of concerns expressed with regards to traffic, Halls Road, Ware Road access, some suggestions of, I believe it was Blasted, in terms of it. Again, notes have been made. By all means, continue to read questions and that in terms of council or the developers. Maybe kind of open it to more general topics that people might want to raise.
This might just show my ignorance. We look at the plans here and they show dedication of parkland. Does that mean title, it goes to Lanceville?
Yes.
Will that happen right at the start? So if this falls on its face again, we will still own the land?
Under the existing development agreement that's registered against the property, the parkland will be dedicated in 2 stages, one 730 acres and then another 170 later on. Under the proposed MOU, at the registration of the phase development agreement, the rezoning and the OCP amendment, the 900 acres would be dedicated. So effectively, before anything was built. The old one, it was 730 before anything was built. This will be 900 before anything was built.
So Lanceville will own that property regardless of what happens financially to
Yes.
development?
Yes.
Looking back in the history of a few years, when the sewer lines were put in originally, phase 1, part of the direction it took was to service Foothills, was it not?
Yeah.
Did Foothills at that point pay the
Yeah, Lanceville Projects, the people that own the village core, as well as some properties on Ware, and Lanceville Foothills shared the cost of extending a sewer pipe up Ware Road to the base of the foothills. So that pipe is in the ground now.
Yeah, and that was paid for.
Correct. They paid roughly $1 million, I think, off the top of my head. Other general questions, comments, concerns? Back?
Clarifying. With water services, we hydrants near it, but it's always been discussed to be concerned about response time. So is the developer prepared to maybe supply some land, a haul, and a truck or two?
And a truck or two. Yes.
And two.
No more than 2. Can I keep them Currently, in the agreement, we're responsible to provide the land for the fire hall and money regarding money to the community as an amending contribution to be used as they wish. So that's as far as it goes right now. If the conversation negotiates some other deal that's in the benefit of both parties, then that would be on the table. But at the moment, there isn't a hall or even half a truck, let alone 2. So it's just the land. Yes.
What kind of plans have we got for the park? Is it right now supposed that it's a wild park, or are we going to have, playground equipment? I foresee it as just a nice wild space, but I don't know the plan.
That's, in terms of the plan itself, park-wise, if you go back to the John Clark area, John was very big on planning the park itself. The way I view it is it's a clean slate. It's effectively, it'll be a Lanceville asset, and so therefore it's up to the Lanceville residents collectively on how that park develops. And certainly in terms of the enhancement from the developer side, it'll be more than welcome. There's also been some very kind of high-level brief discussions with the regional district about their participation as well in trying to define, recognizing the resources they have with large parcels as well. So right now, playground equipment, who knows?
Well, if there's housing going around the edges, is there supposed to be some kind of agreement that you are supposed to put in, little parks with neighborhood parks? So would that come off the 900? Okay.
No, the neighborhood good parts would come off the 900. That's part of the planning process that I'd like to do with you about all the rest of this area. This area is kind of pretty structured the way it is. We were up there the other day looking at the lily beds on some of the slopes. So we certainly would like to do what we can to protect those as part of the starting point. Challenging because there's a water flow issue in those lily beds that really is part of what's key to that moss space. But whatever we can do, certainly Bob had a lot of experience. The team in the past, I think, was some of the most progressive we see in how they manage that stormwater base and let's make sure that water is kept. So the natural areas in this area are very well taken care of. In terms of play equipment, I think the mayor's absolutely right. Long term, this is a public park that falls under your public park planning process. In the short term, as long as it's under our jurisdiction, we're quite comfortable working with you for folks who access it. In terms of playgrounds, that's going to be a conversation we'll need to have as we move sequentially through these. When do you need a playground?
And I presume if any playgrounds go in, they would go in around the housing area.
Presumably.
So there would still be this big area. Because I noticed today there's a sign saying no bear being seen up there. I'd like to have him still up there.
Still up there too. Fair enough. And I think that's part of the rationale for this.
Yes.
At the very beginning of the presentation, on the very first slide, it mentioned that this land was originally First Nations land. So the people who buy this, are they leasing it or do they own it? So this is no longer First Nations land.
Yeah, what I used was the word territory, which is synonymous when we met with them. Their territory extends from French Creek down to Piper's.
But they've sold this block and they no longer have jurisdiction over it.
They didn't technically, it's a good question, they didn't technically sell it. I think it was part of the colonial process. It was never part of one of their reserves and their land grant. So
it's not going to come into a land agreement dispute?
No, not in the conventional sense of an arrangement with First Nations.
Sir, any plans for schools? Schools.
We haven't had that conversation at this moment with the school district. The school district requested, and we'll be very pleased to work with the school district. In my experience, a lot of these projects are generally trying to get families in to keep the existing schools full. That may not be the case in this case. I simply haven't been on the project long enough to know the answer to that question. Do you believe we need a school?
Yeah.
When's juniors?
Right behind here, it's maxed out. It's what, 60 years old or more?
Age-wise? Yeah. With regards to, I'm just going by something somebody mentioned to me. I haven't seen the document. When it comes to the school district, they have a capital plan, and sometime in the next 5 years it's supposed to be looked at. Doesn't mean replaced, it's looked at. But that's a school district jurisdiction thing, and certainly in terms of the ability to put a school up there, my guess is it probably wouldn't be the density of the children born and moving it there. It'd rather be an enhancement of the existing school here. But that's just my guess. The school district.
This is an elementary school?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And the middle school is pretty much.
Then I'm also.
So everything in the middle and high school is good.
Any other general questions or comments? Yes.
Does your company have a kind of vision for the village that's proposed here and how it might work with, complement, or even maybe conflict with Lansville Village, Main Village?
Great question, Harry. So the original plan that is currently in the development agreement and zoning envisions a very small commercial center. It's got a super number of little. If you want a copy of the zoning, there's some copies over here at the side table there for Councilor Wilson. Is very, very small list of uses. And essentially the kind of concept was one of these plazas around here, just a little bit of commercial and almost very little else in that village. I'm interested in having a longer, more fulsome conversation with the community about, there's a lot of uses you can do on a hill up there, views and access to recreation that you never would do in a downtown. And therefore, that's an opportunity for the community to be missed unless we can fulfill that. That's our role in our neighborhood and community. No interest in competing with the downtown, so we want to invest time and energy and resources to get the downtown off the ground. At some point, you'll end up with maybe a third of the population living north of the roads. And so then, at that point, if we want to keep a little more traffic down and have people spending money in Lansville, there comes the question is 15, 20 years from now, should there be some more commercial bus roads? That's not something I'm prepared to say that I know the answer to. Something I would like to talk to the community about is once we get the downtown thriving, then what is the role of something upstairs? I think upstairs uphill, because that becomes an uphill neighborhood, which there might be a lot of balance. In the meantime, there's certainly uses we can do up there that would never go to the downtown, but they would bring value. I've got some ideas, but I'm not prepared to do that one practically. I really want to what do you think that? So it's a great question. The old model was one that's really a model of 10 years ago as an artifact of the discussion 10 years ago. I think we can have a better discussion.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
This is horrible, but at the very beginning, that you're going to talk to the partner with, and I'm listening. Where's the money?
It's not my
Let the CEO answer that.
So our company represents 400 investors that have worked along the way with the previous developer and so on. And we have refinanced this company with a series of new money that come in from Swiss interest, private interest. And so when you think about development, you have those 400 people still in the background as equity owners. We have the new Swiss money coming in to help us through this planning process. And then when we get into construction, we have typical A bank, Toronto Community Bank lending. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, other than water, I don't think there's anything that money won't solve.
You're thinking about icebergs with enough money, you might actually.
Yes, sir.
I live on the corner of Alton Harwood. And we have quite a bit of, it's a very busy corner as it is. And that traffic study, I don't know how long ago it was done or whatnot, but I look out my window every day. Every time I look out there's a car going by. So I think we might need to redo the traffic study or look more into it, because what that video showed me was like, I know that's just what you propose, extra, but like the people that come by my house go down to the neighborhood below me, and I don't think there's 110 homes down there. So my traffic will double. And I mean, that's like, you might as well live on Cole Road.
To give you a little bit of scale, just kind of off the top of my head, there's about 225 water connections in the Chelsea area.
Okay.
So that gives you an idea.
So it'd be a third more then.
Yeah.
And a lot more that don't have a water connection.
Well, I'm speaking specific, down
So
the
like this one in Chelsea area.
more
than that, but doesn't
have
water.
Another thing in terms of scale is 600 plus in lower Lanceville that are on the water system. So looking at Lanceville Road, giving you an idea of kind of the number of homes that are potentially creating that traffic. I'm not justifying their numbers in any way, shape, or form. I'm just trying to give you some reference points that are local in terms of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, traffic is a concern.
I mean, I would almost like speed bumps for people to slow down, because they go ripping around that corner, and I have animals, my neighbors have kids, and they're riding the bikes right on the side of the road there.
Very good point. Yeah. Traffic calming was the first on our list of things we want to deal with, because if the traffic's going to be there, it's going fast, it's louder, it's fast, it's dangerous. The difference in the statistical impact of, say, death between 50 kilometers and 30 kilometers is like X number of people die in an interaction with a car at this level, no life at this level. So anything we can do, I think our bridge in that whole area is already currently designed for 30 kilometers. That's certainly going to be our interest in working with municipalities to get all that. It's just better for everyone.
What hasn't really been mentioned, I think I mentioned it earlier, is for the next 10 years, we're going to have heavy equipment traffic, we're going to have concrete trucks, we're going to have contractors. All that adds to those extra residential traffic that you guys are kind of pinpointing. That's something we really don't want on a residential street. And that's going to happen daily during that peak hour. In the morning, there's going to be contractor vehicles and heavy equipment, and in the afternoon, again.
I think we're going to need to work with the municipality and you on a construction traffic management plan in order to mitigate the problems wherever we can mitigate it. It's like I mentioned, it's one of the absolutely unavoidable sides of the
look like in your overall plan, do you have any alternate plans for that kind of traffic? I mean, even if you were just to take the construction traffic off that thoroughfare, that would benefit everything. Because residential traffic is going to build up over time, and that's guaranteed. But that contractor traffic, that's going to happen in years. That's subdivision being built.
It's a good point.
Well, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out tonight. You know, like I said, a couple little growing pains in terms of size of the room and audio equipment and that. This is expected to be an ongoing process. When Mr. Holland pointed out, for example, people included being part of the task force related to the property, certainly additional input to council as well as input to Mr. Holland's company with regards to the project is something that we want to see. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and concerns. There's been a record kept of all of them. So from the council standpoint, there are things that we need to consider in terms of how we move forward, in terms of what form it takes with regards to agreements, the MOUs or development agreements or phase development agreements. And certainly those kind of hot button topics of water and traffic are ones that need to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. So again, thank you very much for your time tonight. We'll certainly keep in touch, and like I said, there's comment forms that you can provide to make sure that the comments go to the right people. I'd like to thank the people from Strong Mountain for coming out. Hopefully you learned something today, and like I said, keep in touch with regards to information. Thank you.